enjoy the podcast too.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Making the Grade, our weekly look at the Arizona Cardinals PFF grades. We took a break because of the bye and came back and wish it was still the bye. That was a rough game. We'll get into the grades. There were a few bright spots in the game. We all know about Troy McBride, maybe a few others, and maybe one that you might not have caught that I kind of saw here that I think is worth talking about. But it was a rough game. But, you know, the 49ers, we'll talk about this. I mean, they look like the best team in the NFC in my mind, and maybe in the NFL. I mean, I think they are one of the favorites, to go to the Super Bowl and win it. One of the things that they haven't had is consistent quarterback play, and they've got it now. So, but we'll get into the grades. This is the last live stream before Christmas. The Christmas Day is when we'd normally be doing the next live stream. I'm probably going to do it a couple days later since, it's Christmas. But so Merry Christmas to everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got Chris Young. Hey, everyone. Good to see you, Joe. Appreciate you being here with us and hanging out. And folks are going to be coming into the chat. So let's get into it. Look at the grades. Let's jump right in. And as we always do, we're going to start with the offensive line. So I'll sort it by pass blocking snaps. And here we have Paris Johnson Jr. with a 60.8. We have Will Hernandez, 75.2. Yelda Furholt, 76.8. DJ Humphries, 85.5. Tristan Collins, 61.4. And Elijah Wilkinson, back from an injury, with 94.6 in limited snaps, 21 snaps, but not really good grade for him. So we'll talk about that. August KK, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. So let's talk about this. It was a rough game overall, especially on the defensive side. The offense, we'll get to this in a bit. It was an up and down game. Kyler didn't have a great, he actually had his worst game of the year, at least in terms of PFF grades. We'll talk about that as well. But one of the bright spots I think is maybe not talked about enough is the offensive line. I think had one of their better games, if not best game of the season. I think maybe the Dallas game might've been their best, but one of the things we see here is some of these offensive linemen had their best game, at least PFF grade wise, of the season. DJ Humphries, this is his best grade of the season. Yelda Furholt, it's close, but this is his best game of the season in terms of PFF grade. Will Hernandez, this is his second best grade of the season. Wilkinson, this is by far his best grade. Colin, that's not his best grade, nor is it for Paris Johnson Jr., but those are decent. Those aren't good grades, but those are not bad. Like 60 is kind of like average. That's like a C. I know in school it was a D, but for PFF grades, like a grade of 60 is like you didn't do anything great or bad. You just did very basic, nothing special, nothing bad. But like when you look at these are overall across the board, no one had a terrible grade in terms of the offensive line. So that is one of those things that I think is quite encouraging. In fact, if you follow Brian Baldy, he does, stuff on Twitter. He does, kind of quick film study and talks about, highlights players. And he talked about the Cardinals offensive line, how it looks like they're coming together. So if you're looking for something to be optimistic about coming out of this game, besides the continued emergence of Trey McBride, right, who we all love and has, turned into a legitimate tight end one of the things that you could take from this as a cause for optimism, at least being cautiously optimistic, is this was against a really good defensive front, right? Nick Bosa and company, right? Against a defense that is one of the better in the NFL, has pass rushers for days, right? Chase Young, right? Against that defense, this offensive line held up really well, and graded well. And the eye test, to me, it looked that way. Yeah, there were a couple points, Kyler had some pressure and some sacks. That's going to happen. But it felt like he had time. In fact, I looked at some of the advanced stats for Kyler. And in fact, I'm going to show you this right now. And so here's his, game by game grades. Listen, as I mentioned, 52.7, that's his lowest grade of the game. His passing grade of 43.2 was his worst. But here's what I want to show you. This TTD is time to throw. Time till throw. This is how long until till he threw the ball, right? On average. And if you look at it, 3.15 seconds is the longest of the season, right? He had 2.91, 294, 264, 252, and 3.15. Now, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Maybe that means he's holding on to the ball too long. Maybe that means nobody's covered. But the bottom line is he was in the pocket longer, holding onto the ball longer before throwing. Whether that's a good or bad thing against this defense, the fact that he was able to do that suggests that that offensive line was holding up. So, listen, the offensive line hasn't been great this year. It hasn't been the weakest thing on this team. It's been kind of Will Hernandez has been solid. Paris Johnson's given us some cause for optimism, but it hasn't been great. But if you're looking for something to be optimistic about, maybe what we're seeing is they're at a point where they're all kind of starting to gel and get used to the system and find their footing. When you have a new system in place, it does take time for players to kind of get to gel, to get acclimated to it. And, I know it's late in the season, but maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. We'll have to see over time if they continue. Maybe it's a blip on the radar. Maybe they just had a good game. Maybe they had their Wheaties and it was just a good game. But maybe some things are starting to come into place, at least for the offensive line. If that's what's happening, that's a good sign. So we'll see, right? Let's get to some of the comments in the chat. Rapier Gold, thanks for being here. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Class Nasty, Sub Professor, appreciate you hanging out with us. We got Simon Shee. In fact, Simon has another comment. Some quarterback time to throw go up during pressure because they're in a scramble drill. A good measure is when kept clean. Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly he was under pressure some, but it didn't to the eye test. It just didn't seem like it was like some other games. It felt like he was under more pressure against Pittsburgh, but that's me. And, again, this is just kind of my perspective, but Chris Young saying, does Bosa tend to line up on a specific side most of the time, or does he move around a lot? I don't know. That's a really good question. I haven't looked at it closely enough. Good question, though. Aaron Van Buren, thanks for being here. When will TCR be blessed by the Grossi Posse and get even more famous? By that, I mean, Raid. Yeah, that would be quite a blessing. But, I guess they do that, don't they? I don't know if that's going to happen, but hey, they do good work over there for sure. Look, Grandizer, thanks for being here, holding down the chat as always. Appreciate Grandizer, all that you do for the community. AZS, thanks for being here. Fans always changing each week. 1 week it's the offensive line. Next is wide receiver, then it's play calling. Never the quarterback play being bad. Listen, quarterback play was bad this week. I mean, so Kyler had a bad game. I said that, and I don't know if he just got here. He had a bad game. Good quarterbacks are going to have bad games. I think, unfortunately, some people kind of have a little bit of a reactionary approach to that, where he had a bad game. Let's get that bum out of here. Well, we've seen what Kyler can do, and I think even bad game and slow start, I still believe fully that you build around him. But that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, offensive line overall had a pretty good game against a really tough defense. So that's one of the sources of optimism. And that also, kind of was evident when you saw that they had over 200 yards rushing, right? As a team, they had 234 yards rushing total, right? That's really good, right? And it was kind of divided up between Connor. DeMarcado had that one nice long run. Michael Carter had a couple nice runs. Kyler Murray ran for 49 yards, right? And that's part running backs, but it's also the offensive line is partly responsible for that too. So one of the takeaways is, despite the outcome of the game, there's at least a little bit of a silver lining with the offensive line. Let's look at some of the other positions. So getting to tight end, Trey McBride, as what can you say, right? He had another great game, went over 100 yards, became the Cardinals, single season leader in receptions. Is continuing to develop. And I tweeted out about this. it's not just that he was putting up the numbers or garbage time catches or junk time or anything. I mean, he was making plays where he was jumping up for, snagging balls that were thrown high. He was getting some yards after catch. He was, hurdling guys. Like, he is not just like, you remember, like, and I love this guy as especially as a blocker, but remember Max Williams, right? Max Williams would get some balls thrown his way and he'd catch them and he'd take what was there. And he was just like, nothing. He didn't have any wheels, right? But, he was a nice player, right? And before he got injured, right? Trey McBride is a different category, right? He's in a different tier. He is looking like one of those elite tight ends who is not just a guy, like if you throw it to him, he'll catch it. Like, he has a catch radius. Like, he can go up for balls that Ertz was struggling to get as he came back. He's making guys, miss. He's doing things with the ball in his hands. He's looking physical. I mean, he's looking like one of those elite tight ends, like, like a guy, Kittle, right? Across from him, right? Like George Kittle, another elite tight end. Like, he's looking like, to the eye test, he's looking like one of those guys, right? So that's obviously exciting. Elijah Higgins, his overall grade was pretty good. His run blocking wasn't great, but his passing grade 80 was good. He had that really nice, catch in the end zone, which, listen, we got to give Kyler credit. That was a really nice throw under duress. If that touchdown late in the game, garbage time, I get it. Kyler was under pressure and he held in there and got the ball off just at the last second, and really nice throw. It was a bad game for Kyler, but he had a couple nice throws, and that was one of them. Higgins had that nice catch. Unfortunately, Swaim left with the injury. I haven't heard the reports, but it sounds like, from what it looked like it was the kind of thing that he's out for the season. They took him out on the cart. If anyone knows, I mean, it looked like an Achilles based on the way it went down. If anyone's heard any of the reports, let me know. But unfortunately, that was unfortunate to see. Now, one of the other stories of this game is that as much as McBride was awesome, the receivers were invisible, and they have been for a while. Like, it's just the receivers have not really. Dortch has had a couple nice moments, but overall, this team has become very much run and Trey McBride heavy in terms of the offense. And as much as we love the emergence of Trey McBride and love to see the running game doing what it's doing, you got to get something out of those receivers, and that's been a struggle lately. Rondale Moore's grade was low. Marquise Brown grade was low. Dortch's grade was okay. And Michael Wilson's grade wasn't great. Zach Pascal's grade was not good. But, like, it's not just the grades, like the stats, right? Look, we look at the receptions. McBride and Higgins, right? Those guys had the majority. Just the top three receivers were all tight ends. And then we have Dortch with 15 yards, then a running back, like Rondale Moore had 5 yards. It was not, the receivers have, and it's, they're not getting enough targets. They're getting a few, but they've got to figure out how to get the wide receivers involved more. So that's certainly something we're looking at, and we're seeing, the grades it's not looking great in the grades. So the receivers probably aren't doing enough to get open as well. Some of that's probably scheme as well. Let's get to some of more of the comments. August saying, even with Kyler having the bad game, I like how he looked in the pocket. Hopefully the footwork comes along soon. Yeah, I will say this, and we talked about this last live stream. I talked about this. I was on with Marcos and on the Redbird Reboot podcast. And we talked about one of the things that at least I've seen is it looks like Kyler is being very intentional about staying in the pocket and not kind of running out the back of the pocket when pressure comes, but trying to step up, trying to play within the offense. And he's hanging in there longer, and he's taken a few more sacks, I think, than he would have in the past. But I think it's a choice to not bail so quickly, to try to stick in there and see it. And I'm good with that. I mean, that's him committing to this offense and the system. He's acclimating to it. It's going to take some time. I think against the Steelers, We saw more of what that's supposed to look like this week against a really good defense. It was tougher. So yeah, I would generally agree. AZS saying Kyler Murray has one game with PFF grade above 80 since he injured 2020. Not great. Yeah, listen, and some of that is last year. We know what that was like for overall for the team. So I still believe in the arm talent and the leg talent. Even despite the grades. I will say this: above 80 is a really good grade. So that's a really high mark you're setting. He's had games in the 70s, which are really good games for a quarterback too. So, but Zach Felix, thanks for being here. It doesn't help our quarterback when wide receivers don't get separation or get open. Yep, that's a big part of the problem too. So, I mean, those receiver grades are part of the problem, right? Like, and remember, here's the thing you have to understand about how PFF grades work. The player grades, when they look at a player, they look at what the player did regardless of outcome. Okay. So like literally, like if the quarterback throws the ball and hits the receiver right in the hands and the receiver just messes it up and it bounces up and it's an interception, the quarterback still gets a positive grade because he didn't do anything wrong. It's not his fault if the receiver, right, botched that, right? So what I'm saying here is if the receivers were getting open consistently and doing, and having good games, and it was just Kyler just was missing them all the time, the receivers' grades would be better than they are. Okay. Because they would get graded positively for beating their man, for getting open and things like that. So it's the fact that their grades are down and his grades are down, at least this game certainly means that he didn't have, this game, his throws weren't great at it. The problem was on both sides. Right. But certainly if receivers are better, his performance, if they're getting open, it's a little easier to have good grades still. But yeah, we're having some struggles with the receivers. This is an area that they need to get some better play out of. And, it's going to be an area where I think there's going to be some changes. We'll be talking about that in weeks to come, but I was talking about this in the Discord server. I've kind of come to the point where I think a lot of people have been this point for a while. I sometimes take time to get to places, but with Hollywood Brown is, listen, I love the skill set, especially the speed, but I'm at the point now where I don't think it makes sense to pay him. At least not the kind of money he's going to take. It's going to take to keep him. Someone's going to offer him a bigger contract than I would be willing to pay. I think you need a guy with his speed to take the top off the defense, but I think you can get that guy in like the third round. Like look at like a guy like Tutu Atwell. Okay. He's not like the number one receiver for the Rams. He's not a household name, but he's a speedster. You just need a guy like that who you can line up on the outside and occasionally send on a go route to take the top off the defense. Even if he doesn't have the best hands or he's not the greatest, after the catch, you just need someone who's fast on the outside who can line up and send him sometimes. And you don't have to spend a lot of money on that guy. You can get that guy in the draft, right? So, that's Hollywood Brown has the skill set to be that guy and more. He can do some things with the ball in his hands. So he's got the skill set, but I think what we're seeing from Kyler is he does better with bigger targets like the tight end, right? And as much as Hollywood Brown's his guy from college, that offense he was in college, he was wide open a lot more and he wasn't playing NFL defenses. I think this team needs to build around Trey McBride, probably get another tight end maybe on day 2 or early day 3 of the draft to kind of complement that tight end room, have a kind of a nice, strong tight end room, get a big receiver. Yes, I would love to see Marvin Harrison Jr. Taken in the first round. If it's not him, get another big receiver, get a couple big receivers, build around the tight ends and some big receivers, and get a speedster later in the draft, round 3 or 4, just someone who maybe doesn't have, everything else, but he's got speed, and have that be your guy you send. And honestly, what you could do actually, and I was talking about this also in Discord. I know we're all down on Rondale Moore, because he hasn't really done a lot this year, but he has that speed. So let Hollywood Brown walk. Rondale Moore is on 1 more year on his rookie deal, and he's got the speed. Send him deep. Let him be that guy. play Greg Dortch in the slot, right? Let Greg Dortch be the guy who makes those plays in the slot. He's shifty, and let Rondale Moore next year be your deep threat guy, and then get some big receivers. That's kind of where I'm at right now with that. So let me get a couple more comments. Let's see. Bluefire 44, thanks for being here. Honestly, I don't see Hollywood on this team anymore next season. He has been completely invisible last 4 games. Michael Evans, Brown got to go. Then it says wide receiver F run game, a QBD. Okay, sure. The alphabet soup. Thanks anyway though. Didn't quite follow what you said there, but if you want to use full words and sentences, I'd be glad to kind of respond to that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm too old to understand that, I guess. So anyway, rant over about receivers. Need some things to change there. It just feels like big receivers are better for Kyler. And just maybe have one deep threat guy again, like that, even if it's just someone like, that you draft and you keep him through his rookie deal and then replace him 4 years later. Okay. So we got the receivers. That's an area of struggle. Let's go ahead and talk about quarterbacks. We talked about Kyle. Let's talk about him a little bit more. So again, his grade wasn't great. So here's his passing grade. But I mentioned the passing grade. 43.2 was his worst so far. After coming off his best game against Pittsburgh, his run grade was good, but it was just, not a ton of snaps, but 90.7. But a couple things I want to point out. His graded throws, big time throws. I know it's truncated here. You can't see it, but this is his big time throws and big time throw percent, right? That's really good throws. And then these are turnover worthy throws and turnover worthy throw percent. This was a boomer bust game to some degree because he had 2 big time throws, which matches his best performance in that regard, his first game back. Other games, he's only had 1. But the real story here is the 4 turnover worthy throws. That is double what he'd had total this season. In fact, coming into this game, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Granted, small sample size, he'd only played, 4 games, but his turnover worthy throw rate was one of the lowest in the league. And now, he's got these 4 more, right? So, now the rate ends up, I think, is still actually one of the lower ones in the league, I think, because I think he had fewer throws overall. So the percent, I'm guessing, let's see. Don't have it. I'm not going to look at that, worry about that right now. But anyway, bottom line is, though, 4 turnover worthy throws. That's twice as many as he had all in his first 4 games combined. So not, that kind of reinforces that this was not a good game, right? Again, really good defense he's playing against, right? In fact, let's see, was that the best defense? I mean, Pittsburgh has a decent defense, but I think this was the best defense he's played, right? So, San Francisco, what more can you say? They're a really good team, right? Real quick, Rambo, thanks for being here. Busy with life. I'll watch the live back later. Just pop by and say, hey, appreciate you doing that. So yeah, Grindizer is saying players stock up and down. So listen, stock up is I think most of the offensive line, right? That's definitely stock up, right? Elijah Higgins stock up, right? Receivers all kind of stock down. It was already down, but kind of down more. Murray stock down this game, right? Running backs, I think, stock up overall, right? So yeah. So let's talk. And Clayton Tune was in just for 2 snaps, nothing to speak of there, right? He handed off the ball mainly, while Kyler was, kind of banged up real quick. The running backs, okay. So James Conner had a decent game overall. His running grade of 62.8 wasn't great. He had 1 really nice run, but it was a little up and down in terms of the runs. His pass blocking and his passing grades were good, but overall a good grade of 68.0. Michael Carter had a couple nice runs, had a nice grade. And DeMarcado, I mean, he had that really nice run for a touchdown, right? 87.2 run grade for him. So overall nice game by the running backs, right? And the grades reflected that. And, again, we saw over 200 yards rushing. So on the offensive side, the offensive line and the run game were getting things going. The passing game, other than Trey McBride, and Elijah Higgins, the tight ends, it was inconsistent. So there are some things to be optimistic about with the offensive line and the running game and the continued, Trey McBride becoming consistent, right? Becoming a consistent tight end one. And, seeing some nice things from Elijah Higgins too. So this is, there's some optimistic things to be optimistic about here. And real quick, looking at Elijah Higgins, let's see he's had 3 solid games in a row in terms of his PFF grades. So he had a first game was okay on limited snaps and it was a little bit down. Now it's back up. His grade of 57.7 is, okay for a rookie. This is a guy that I think could be, part of that room long term, at least, for the foreseeable future, next couple of years at least. If he continues to play like this, that's a nice piece there, right? So yeah. All right. So now the offense had a better game than the defense. I'm going to tell you, we're just going to get that out of the way. If you look at the worst grades on offense, were the wide receivers, pretty much all of them. But overall, the grades weren't too bad. Oh, let me real quick. I want to hit one last point about Wilkinson. Wilkinson was a guy we were really frustrated with because he was a guy if you remember the video I did last season about how I would kind of fix the Cardinals, he was a free agent. I suggested that I would go after if it were me because he's played tackle and guard, that versatility. And lo and behold, he's a guy they actually signed. So I was, optimistic. And if you look at his career grades, this is the reason I was optimistic is like, he's not a Pro Bowler, but he's a guy who's throughout his career graded, okay, first couple years, 50s and 60s, but then last couple years, mid 60s, like a starting caliber, not high end, but a starting caliber player who I thought wasn't going to be too expensive and was a guy you could get in there and be solid while you're developing some young guys, right? And then we saw his first couple games were just horrific. Got a little bit better, then real bad here, and then he got injured. He was out, right? His grades have not been good, right? And then he comes back, again, limited snaps, but plays really well, like really, really well, like outstanding grade. Now, again, small sample size. Maybe it's just one game and he's going to go back to being bad. But again, if you're looking for like a reason for optimism or a reason for hope, he missed time with an injury. So the question is, how much was an injury nagging him in the first 6 weeks, right? Was he kind of banged up and then nursing a nagging injury, and then finally it got aggravated and he had to go down on IR, and now he's back and he's healthy? Was his poor play partly due to that injury? And are we going to get a better version of him now that he's healthy? I don't know. Time will tell. But that's a plausible explanation, right? So time will bear it out whether that's what's going on or not. But that could be, and that would certainly be nice if we got good guard play out of him down the stretch. That could be okay. This could be a guy we could bring back if he's healthy, and I think you still want to draft someone to become the long-term plan. But if he's healthy and he's playing better, maybe there's a reason for some optimism there. We'll have to see over the next couple weeks. All right. So let's switch though to the defensive side of the ball. On the defensive side at the top, there's some okay grades on first 3 guys on limited snaps, but I'm just going to scroll down here because it gets ugly quick. Look at that. A lot of red there. Don't like seeing that much red. It was awful. And nothing about that surprising. 45 points put up by the 49ers. So the grades were not good on the defensive side. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna sort it by coverage grades so we can get the defensive backs first, right? And the secondary players, and then some of the linebackers and such. Starling Thomas, 44.9, not good. His tackling grade was fine, but his coverage grade wasn't good. But sadly, it wasn't worse. Budda Baker, his run defense grade, he struggled there, 29.7. Now he was sick, right? Coming to the game. They weren't sure if he was going to play because of an illness, and he ended up playing. So maybe he was affected by that, right? He wasn't having a Michael Jordan flu game though, right? So Budda Baker really, probably his lowest grade of the season, 29.7. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, definitely by far his lowest of the season, probably one of the lowest of his career, right? So, we'll give him a pass, assume that it had to do with, him not feeling well. Antonio Hamilton Sr. didn't have a great grade, but he was one of the better grades, right? His tackling grade brought that down, right? 50.1 wasn't great. Jalen Thompson had a decent grade, coverage 66.8, a 2.2 in tackling, though. The one play where the wide open, I think it was Christian McCaffrey, the wide open touchdown, where if you watch the play, like Jalen Thompson follows him and then sets into the zone and lets him go, and there was no one behind him, no safety or deeper help on him, and then he was wide open and just goes in for a touchdown. You wonder, what was that a mistake on his part? That was he supposed to stay with him, or was it the person be someone deeper who was supposed to kind of have his back? So I don't know. Maybe it's hard to know. So, but that play was, I remember seeing that and wondering if that was on him or if it was the deep help that didn't do their job. But he had a decent grade. Garrett Williams, though, this was by far his worst graded game of the season. Listen, we love Garrett Williams, the third round pick who's recovered from injury and come back and has looked really good. But his, you look through his grades this year have been really good, with a few games that were but no bad games up to this point. This is his first bad game. And it was bad across the board. Listen, he's a rookie playing against a couple really good receivers. And so I'm not worried about it. He's looked really good solid consistently as a rookie since he started playing. One bad game against San Francisco, we'll take that, right? But it was a really bad game for him. Let's real quick get the other defensive backs and we'll come back. There's a few more down here. Sashiri had, not a good game on 11 snaps. Joy Blount, okay. He had that special teams play that ended up being overturned that we thought was a turnover, right? But didn't end up standing. So the secondary got torched. That's the story here, right? So that was not good. Doc's Cards, linebackers early and often. Well, not early, but I mean, if you're Steve Keim, no, I think you're gonna, in terms of draft strategy, middle linebackers. I don't take them earlier than round 2, and I often look more like round 3 or 4. You can find good inside linebackers in the day 2 and 3. You don't have to take those early, but you take. For me, I'm taking receiver, cornerback, interior defensive line, maybe edge. I mean, we could use a really good edge player. There's part of me wants to work with developing the guys we got, but if we don't take an edge, I'm definitely taking interior pass rusher. I'm probably taking interior defensive line either way, to be honest. That's the position I want to go for, and then edge maybe. But Andrew James, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Elijah Wilkins is frustrating. Let him play last few games. Yep, let's let him play. See what we get from him. See if he shows some consistency or not. But yeah, so listen, the secondary had a really rough game, and it certainly shows in the score. Middle linebacker Josh Woods, right, was not a good game for him. 29.0 grade. He's Chris Barnes, a little better, 53.9. And our middle linebackers, it's tough. Like Woods, he's started off bad, had a nice stretch in the middle of the season, and now he's been bad for 3 games in a row, right? Look at Chris Barnes. Chris Barnes has been better of the two, right? He's an undrafted free agent 2020, came from the Green Bay Packers. His overall grade, really 73.4, has actually been pretty solid. He's had some good games. So last couple haven't been the best, right? Woods has, again, had a few stretch of a few good games, but neither of these guys have been consistent enough, I would say. Chris Barnes has been the better of the two. Maybe keep him around as a depth guy, but you need, I mean, Kaiser White's, he'll be back next year, and after the injury, but you need either to move. And I know Kyle Odegaard tweeted about this, and I would tend to agree. like, and we've talked about this before. Zaven Collins, I just wish they would move him back to inside linebacker, right? Owen Papo, they had him at outside linebacker here, which is interesting, but he's also inside linebacker, at least as I was drafted, but he's not, I don't think he's answering. I think he's more of a special team. So they do need to get some help at inside linebacker, whether it's they move Zaven Collins back or they draft someone, right? I think, Kaiser White, I think, is better for the weak inside linebacker, the will linebacker. You need a Mike. To me, Zaven Collins seems like a Mike, but if they want to play him at edge, then they need to get someone else to be a Mike linebacker. I like, if you want to keep Barnes as a depth guy who you rotate in, that's fine. I just, he's right now, he's like playing, him and Woods. I mean, Woods should not be starting. He's special teams fine, but middle linebacker is a problem right now too. Again, Christian McCaffrey is a problem. That's true, but it hasn't been consistently good enough. Now, let's go ahead and we'll bring up the pass rush snaps to kind of bring the edge rushers up here on the defensive linemen. Ledbetter, not good. Hasn't really been good at all this year. I think he's had a few okay games, but it hasn't been good, right? Stills had an okay game, right? We like Dante Stills. He's part of the plan for the future in my mind. He's a solid rotation piece, great get in the 6th round. He's had a few downs. He had a first couple of games again. We talked about this. He had a rough game against LA. Pittsburgh was okay. He's back to getting his grades in the green. Overall grade 60.7, for a rookie 6th rounder with some really nice games in there. Like him, good to see him in a game that was a rough game, to see him have a decent grade, right? Roy Lopez, 61.5, it's okay, right? Like him as a nose tackle, I think they should keep him around. Kevin Strong had a rough game. His grade, right, 30.5. He's been one of the better defensive linemen for them, but that's a low bar. It's been a little bit rough, spotty here, there with some good games mixed in. Then you have, so you have the defensive line there. Let's get a couple other. Naquan Jones, guy I think was, I believe they promoted him from practice squad. Didn't have a good game from him, right? So not great. Let's look at the linebackers. We have Zaven Collins had an okay grade, right? Zaven's been solid, right? For this team. And his grade, I think it's around 75 for the season, 75.3. He's the pass rush. I mean, his pass rush grade here, 6.2 is okay, but no sacks. He's got 4 sacks on the season, but hasn't had one since, week 7. He's a really good player, right? They've got a reason. I just don't know what it is for playing him on the edge. I like him as the Mike, so I hope they move him back and he's 6th round, right? Ojulari didn't have a great game, right? I mean, Gardeck had a bad game, just overall. Dimakaji on 12 snaps had a decent grade, right? Papo only on 3 snaps, not good grade. Cameron Thomas only played 4. He had a good grade, but only on 4 snaps. We'll talk about him in a second. Jess Lacada, 12 snaps, decent grade, right? I think that's it for the outside linebacker. So let's real quick. I've talked about this before. I'm worried about Cameron Thomas. I think he's on. I don't think he's part of the plan. He was getting some consistent snaps as part of the rotation, and his grades early on were okay, but no sacks on the season, right? The pass rushing just wasn't happening. He was playing okay aside from that, I guess, well enough to grades in the 60s, but lately it's been down. And now he's, got 4 snaps. Good grade but it's small on that, but it's small sample size. So, when you see his snaps go down to 4, a guy that was not drafted by this regime, right? I mean, it feels like he's not going to be part of the plan, is what it's feeling like, which is disappointing because I liked him as a player. He reminded me of some pass rushers, like the guys in Cincinnati, kind of like those guys, the duo that they've got there, kind of built like them, plays a little bit like them, but Yeah. Sad to see that. So, you know, maybe, maybe they really do need an elite edge rusher when we're not seeing anything consistent from there. But they definitely need some help on the inside of that defensive line for sure. So we looked at the cornerback, safeties, edge rushers, linebackers, just in general defensively. You know, the guys with the best grades are mostly guys with limited snaps, right? So like those first three guys are small sample size, right? When you get to guys that are playing anywhere near starter minutes, Stills and Collins, Jalen Thompson, and then it's really downhill from there and really ugly. But what do you expect, right? With a game that was 45-29, that's what you're getting there. Real quick, let's just highlight some of the better grades on the 49ers. It's, sad to see, compared to what we got. You see like some of their better grades, offensive line, Feliciano, Williams, McKivitz, Brock Purdy had a nice game, right? Samuel, receivers, like, some of the better grades up there. No one, they had a few lower modest grades, but whatever. You see some really good grades in the offensive line, which speaks to the fact that our pass rush couldn't get home. On defense, Charvarius Ward with the pick 6, great grade on his. Fred Warner had a nice grade. Nick Bosa had a good grade, despite the fact that Cardinals offensive line did pretty good. Lenore had a good grade. Cornerbacks, right? And the cornerbacks were some of their better grades in that, and that speaks to the struggles that our receivers had, right? So now they had a little bit of tough on, their defensive line, interior defensive line didn't grade well, right? And middle linebacker, the rotational guy, Winters only played 12 snaps, but that defensive line struggling and some of those linebackers struggling is, kind of the corollary of the Cardinals run game having a good game, over 200 yards rushing, right? So that's not terribly surprising, right? So, let's look real quick at the Cardinals overall, the lineups, right? Like we like to do kind of to wrap this up. For the season, we got the safeties, we know who they are, Baker and Thompson. They're solid players. Their grades overall good. Linebackers, Barnes grades well, Woods not so much. Hamilton's grades okay. Starling Thomas isn't grading particularly well, but no one really is as far as the cornerbacks. Dimikashi's grades decent. Collins is good. Stills, Lopez, Ledbetter is not great. We'll switch this over to their nickel, rotates in a few other people here. We see Gardeck's grade is still solid. Ojulari's got a decent grade. Despite the bad game, Williams' grade, is okay. I'd like to see that go up, but still feel really good about Garrett Williams as a player. On the offensive side, Brown's and Wilson's grades are fine, but the production hasn't been there, right? Rondale Moore's grade isn't good. The production hasn't been there either. Trey McBride, though, up to 80, right? He's the 4th graded tight end, and I was looking at the tight ends, and one of the guys that is ahead of him has half his snaps. So it's a guy who's a part-time player. So he's, of the guys who are full-time starting tight ends, he's actually the 3rd amongst those. Kyler Murray's grades, not great. Need to see that go up. Again, he's acclimated in the system. I'm giving, I know not everyone's as patient as I might get that, but I'm giving him a pass for this year. Just, it's all about him getting acclimated to the system and getting things going. And we're looking at next year. So I'm preaching patience. I know not everyone feels that, but that's where I'm at. Connor's grade, we know what he's been this year, 83, solid, 6th amongst halfbacks. The offensive line, Hernandez has had a nice year. He's 17th amongst guards. The rest of them are not great. Low end starters, in terms of their grades. And with offensive line, I've talked about this on other streams in the past, but it's kind of a weak link position, meaning it's more important that you don't have anyone who's absolutely terrible. That's the most important thing. Having a Pro Bowler is nice, but the most important thing, you'd rather have 5 good players or decent players than 1 great player or 2 great players and the rest scrubs, right? Now, these grades aren't great. Hernandez is good. The rest of these are but no one is in the red, right? There's no one grading in the 30s or 40s here. There's no Billy Price on this offensive line. That's the good news. You want to see it get better, but at least there's not a total weak link there. That, again, another silver lining here. So listen, it was a rough game. There, you have to really look for those silver linings. I get it, and some people don't have patience for that. And if you're one of those people, then cool, go somewhere. there's other places they'll tell you what you want to hear and will lean into this. What I do is I look towards the future. What are we building towards? What are the optimists? What are the things we can build on? That doesn't mean things are where they need to be. They have to get better. They have to improve this roster. Players have to get more acclimated to things. But I'm looking at this with an eye for what are the things that are there that can be built on, and there are some things to build on. So, yeah, wasn't a great game. Couple optimistic things though. Especially, I think the offensive line is good direction there. Obviously, the continued development of Trey McBride. So, all right. Well, we're going to kind of wind it down and get out of here. Next week, I'm not sure exactly what day we're going to do the live stream on. It's probably going to be Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll make that decision next week. I'm going to enjoy Christmas, and I hope you do the same. Hope everyone's safe. Has a good holiday with your family and your loved ones. So everyone, be safe. Stay warm. If you're in Arizona, that shouldn't be hard. Where I'm at, it's a little cooler. But appreciate y'all, what you do, hanging out with us in the chat. If you're not part of the Discord, there's a link in the description. Join the Discord. There's a great community of folks in there that love talking Cardinal stuff all the time, and even other stuff, Suns, and there's even an anime corner. Brandon Probst, thanks for being here. Great show. Enjoy your holidays. Thank you, sir. I hope the same for you as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to Aaron Van Buren, draft O-line, please. They need to do that. Yeah. They need another interior offensive lineman and another tackle at least, right? So thank you everyone for being here. We're going to put up the shout outs for the channel members. Thank you to everyone who watches and supports. I appreciate you all. We will see you later. Happy holidays. Peace.
1, 2, 3, 4.